Hey guys, what's going on? It's your boy, the Mad Geiger, and you may remember a couple months ago, I think it was, I did a video where I talked about all the different types of genres of video games and which ones I played, which ones I didn't play. But what I thought I'd do is start a new series where I actually sort of go more in depth on each individual sort of genre of video games, and I might do the same for movies, TV shows as well, further down the line. But also during these videos, I'm just going to talk about like the different types of games within those genres, and then I'm going to sort of do a recommendation, five recommendations, as well as some honourable mentions that I would sort of recommend for sort of newcomers to the genre. So some recommendations and stuff like that. But today I'm going to focus on racing games. Now, like I said, growing up, I loved cars. Cars and video games. They were like two of my favorite things. And I'm slowly getting back into cars. I've been watching Top Gear all the time. I've been playing a lot of The Crew too, and so I'm sort of getting back into like cars and stuff again now. So what I thought I'd do is sort of talk about, the racing games in genre. So what is a racing game? Well, quite simply put, it's a game where you race. um, but there's so many different types of genres. There's three different gameplay styles when it comes to racing games. You have simulators, you have arcade experiences, and then you have sort of like a hybrid, which is a mix of both, really. So your simulators would be like games that are sort of realistic, try to be as true to life as driving the car, in a video game. And honestly, I'm not really a big fan of simulators as such, but you've got like simulators like your Gran Turismos, those sort of types of games. And then you've got a lot of simulators like Bus Simulator and Truck Simulator and all of these other ones, that try to be, it is a racing game, but you would call them a driving slash racing game because, well, when you're driving, fast cars around the track, whether or not it's realistic or not, it's still a racing game, right? But then obviously you've got like, there's the arcade style racing games. These are the ones that, well, you find them in the arcade. Of course, a lot of them have been ported over to console. This is where, it's not realistic. It's just a game. You're driving a car, and stuff like that, and or a bike or whatever, and you're just having fun, And you got the hybrid, which is kind of like a bit of both, that have sort of like, they might have like a realistic setting, for example, kind of like Burnout Paradise or Forza Horizon or something like that, which is sort of like tries to be realistic and have some sort of simulation, but it's arcadey in the sense that you're not going to blow up and you don't have to worry about fixing your cars and all of these in-depth mechanics, but then you've got loads of subgenres of racing games. So first of all, you've got your kart racers. Kart racers would be your Mario Kart, your Crash Nitro Kart, Diddy Kong Racing. There's a ton of them, and kart racers are what I like to call sort of like the kart racers are kind of like vanilla ice cream. Everyone loves vanilla ice cream. It's a safe flavor to go with. Well, not everyone. I know some people probably don't like it, but it's a safe flavor, because it can be enjoyed by everyone from younger people to older people, And these are the sort of games that where you're driving around and it's you have all these power ups and things like that, and it's all about having fun and being competitive, but also like those sort of things. They're fun. I like kart races. They can be a lot of fun. Of course, we've already talked about simulators like Gran Turismo and stuff like that. They're your more hardcore stuff. They've got a fan base, but it's not something I'd recommend for if you're just an avid racing fan. Then you've got your track racing games. Your dedicated motorsport, if you will. And there's something for everyone with dedicated motorsport, much like the actual motorsport itself. But you've got dedicated motorsport racing games, you've got dedicated motorsport racing games that are like, like your Formula One, your touring car, your GP, MotoGP, your motocross, all of these sort of dedicated racing games. So if you're a fan of that particular motorsport, chances are there's a game out there that you're probably going to enjoy. If you're not a big fan of it, you're probably going to be like, well, maybe it's not so much for me. I tend to get a little bit bored with track races after a while. But I mean, there are some good ones out there, You've got open world racing games as well, sort of games that, when we think of open world games, we think of like Grand Theft Auto, Saints Row, those sort of games. But even those games have cars in them, and they're not necessarily driving games per se. But then you've got open world games like Test Drive Unlimited, The Crew, Forza Horizon, Need for Speed, and Midnight Club. There's a lot of these open world games, and they're really cool because you get to explore this big world or whatever, but you've in the midst of that you've got racing going on, and I love that. I love that. So those are the ones that are sort of like, to me personally, if you like open world games, an open world racing game is kind of like a match made in heaven. Just like think of like GTA, but without the shooting and stuff like that. Then you've got sort of like your sort of offspring. There's a lot of these sort of arcade off-road racers like motorsport, motocross games, ATV games. So if you're into like off-road racing games, there's a lot of them out there. Of course, you've got rally games as well, and rally sort of is kind of like fits into all three of these. You've got realistic rally games like Dirt, for example, Dirt Rally, for example. You've got like unrealistic ones like the Sega Rally Championship. Well, they might have been realistic back in those days, but they're arcade races, and then you've got like sort of like a mismatch of both. And then you've got sort of like your miscellaneous racing games, your top down ones, your like Micro Machines, for example, a top down racing game. You've got things like Demolition Derby type racing games. You've got action racing games like Twisted Metal, Carmageddon, those sort of games where it's not necessarily racing per se, it's about blowing each other up, but you're still driving around. So racing, in my opinion, is probably the biggest and has the most to offer in terms of subgenres and loads of different types. Chances are, even if you're not a big fan of racing games, there is something out there for you. But I've got here 10 recommendations. We'll just go on 10 recommendations. I was going to do it as 5 honourable mentions, 5 main ones. But we've got 10 recommendations that I've got here. And this is a bit for everyone, really. These are 10 racing games that I would recommend. First up, we have Hydro Thunder. Hydro Thunder is awesome. It's an arcade racer, so you know what you're getting yourself into. But it's not cars, it's not bikes, it's boats. Yeah, it's a water sport. Yeah, haha, funny. Water sport based racing game. But it is awesome. It is so cool. It's fast, it's all about fast and driving really fast, Imagine something like Wipeout, but with boats. The game obviously is an arcade game, but it can be found and purchased elsewhere. I believe it was ported over to the PlayStation 1. That's how I played it growing up. I think maybe the Dreamcast as well got a version. But there is there is also Hydro Thunder Redux, or Hydro Thunder something else, which was the Xbox Live arcade version, if you will. And then obviously, if you do want to get it with 7 other games, you can get it as part of the Midway Arcade Treasures Part 3 compilation. It is included in that, so that's a really cool one. Next up, we have the Burnout series. Now, to me, I've not played all of them, but the one that I hear the best, the one that I hear the most positive response is Burnout 2. That was a really fun game. I played a little bit of it, but it's an arcade racer. It's all about speed, it's all about being fast and driving these fast cars through highways and off-road and, track racing. But it's all about like, it has a really cool mode called Crash Mode, where basically you have to drive a car or a bus or whatever it is, and you've got to basically crash and make the biggest impact, basically. So that's one that's really fun. Even if you're not necessarily a fan of the racing aspect, that's one that a lot of people love, and I would also recommend it. Next up, we have Sega Rally. Personally, there are a ton of rally games out there, but the one that always sticks out to me is Sega Rally Championships. It's always the game that you see in the arcade when you go on holiday or you go into an arcade. You see that sitting there, and it's always the first racing game you go to. You could go into an arcade and it could have 20 different racing games. That's always the first one I go to. Who doesn't love Sega Rally Championships? It was ported over to the Sega Saturn, the original. The Dreamcast, I believe, got Sega Rally Championships 2 or 3. And then there was Sega Rally Revo, which came out for the PSP and the PS3 and Xbox 360, which was like a new version, which is actually really good. But Sega Rally Championships is an awesome rally racing game. It is arcadey, but it does have some simulation feel to it, but it is a great one and I highly recommend it. Next up, I would have to go with Road Trip, because Road Trip Adventure to me is more than just a racing game. You know, first of all, you're driving around in these little, like, weird looking shaped cars. They call them penny cars here in the UK. Essentially, they were these tiny little cars. You put a penny in the back and it would make the car go. But that's kind of what they remind me of. It's obviously a spin-off from the Gadget Racer series, which was quite popular in Japan. But Road Trip Adventure was awesome because it was an open world RPG. Yeah, it was an RPG game with cars. It was all about driving around this big open world. You know, you'd find all these hidden things. You could talk to other cars. The cars would talk. In many ways, I think that game inspired the movie Cars. I probably didn't, but I don't know, maybe I'm grasping at straws. But I love that game. So, you know, you've got a lot of RPG elements of customizing your car, doing the different races and bonus modes. There's got loads of cool multiplayer modes. The best one was the soccer mode. I know, obviously, Rocket League is a soccer-based car game, whatever you want to call it. But Road Trip did it first. Road Trip Adventure did it first. It's not as good as Rocket League, but it did it first. I love that game. It's so fun, and it's available on the PlayStation 2, and I think it came out on the GameCube and the original Xbox, but I can't be certain. But I know it was definitely on the PS2. Also, it had a Game Boy Advance version, but I think that was a bit different. Next up is a PS1 game, definite hidden gem for me, Total Driving. I've always been a fan of racing games that don't focus on one type of vehicle. And Total Driving, I think it went under a different name in the US. I don't know the name off the top of my head. But in the UK and the Europe, it was called Total Driving on the PlayStation 1. And it was exclusive to the PlayStation 1. It might have been on PC, but in terms of consoles, it was exclusive to the PlayStation 1. And this game was awesome because it had rally cars in there. It had dune buggies. It had like supercars in there. It had touring cars. It had 6 different types of cars, and then obviously you could switch between what team you were representing, like England, US, Germany, whatever. But I always remember that game, a lot of fun, a really underrated game, and it had an awesome soundtrack. Don't believe me, just look up the soundtrack online. It is awesome. Like, it is like bumping, man. It's like do do do. It is so good. I love it. Next up is MX versus ATV. There's a lot of these MX versus ATVs. I think the original was on PS1, but it might have been PS2. I know it was around about that era. And then the one that I played was on PS3, and there's a new one out that came out a couple of months ago. These games are awesome. They're off-road racing games. Obviously, I'm not a huge bike person, but these games have a lot of you know, motocross, supercross, whatever you want to call them, dirt bike things. But you've also got things like dune buggies, monster trucks, rally raid vehicles, you know, ATVs, you know, quad bikes, we call them here in the UK. They're called ATVs in the US, but we call them quad bikes here in the UK. It's a really fun game. While it is mostly a racing game, it does have some freestyle modes as well. We can do tricks and things like that. There are a ton of MX games out there, but MX vs ATV is a great series. Personally, I don't know which one is the best one, but I played one on PS3. I think it was called MX vs ATV Unhinged or something like that. I don't know. It's been a long time. But that one was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I'd recommend it. The next one is kind of an obvious one here, is The Crew 2. Personally, in a sea of all of these open world games, racing games, while Forza Horizon is probably the best of the bunch, I think Crew 2 offers more than Forza Horizon in the sense that it's not just racing. It's got driving aspects of it, but it's got bikes, it's got cars, it's got rally, it's got off-road, demolition derby, monster trucks, boats, planes, everything you could ever want from a racing game. Now, albeit it is a live experience, which means you do need to be connected to the internet to play it, but that doesn't mean it's all PvP stuff. In fact, I'd probably say about maybe 5, maybe 10% of the game has some PvP elements. The rest all can be done without anyone else. And I love it, man. I love that game. It's so much fun. And I think it's a great combination of both arcade racing with some simulation. The cars feel somewhat realistic, but not overly realistic to the point where you feel like you're playing a simulator. And I love it, man. It's an Ubisoft title, so do with that as you may. But I think it's a great game, and I'd highly recommend it for any newcomer to open world racing games. And if you enjoy it, then maybe you would enjoy the Forza Horizon or something. And the best part is you don't need to have an Xbox to play it, because it came out on the PS4 and PC as well. So there's your caveat. If you want Forza Horizon, you need an Xbox. If you want a game similar to Forza Horizon, but in my opinion has more to offer, then this is available on PS4 and PC. I know Horizon is also on PC, but, you know. The next one is Need for Speed Underground. I had to include one Need for Speed game on here, but Need for Speed Underground, to me, was a game changer. Now, of course, street racing games have been around for quite some time, but it was Need for Speed Underground that sort of put them on the map. I remember playing that game. I got it for Christmas, put it on. I was blown away. You could not only drive these awesome looking cars, but essentially what it was is you would just choose a standard looking car, like a Golf or a Honda or whatever, and you would customize it. You could get parts for it. You could increase the speed, the handling, and whatever, but you could make your car look awesome. And it was all set during the night. I think it was set, I don't know what country it's set in. I want to say something like Los Angeles or something like that. I don't know. It feels like that sort of place, but it had multiple race types. You had your standard circuit race, sprint races, elimination type races, but you had drag racing, which was all about, you know, timing your shifts just right, and drift modes as well, where you had to try and skid around and get a decent score and whatnot. But I think Need for Speed Underground, while many people say Need for Speed Underground 2 is superior because it has open world aspects to it, and Need for Speed Most Wanted improved on it even more, I felt like the original Need for Speed Underground did what the game set out to be, and that was to be a dedicated street racing tuner car. Tuner as in Tuner, not tuna like the fish. But, you know, obviously inspired by things like Fast and Furious and stuff like that. I don't know if it came out before or after Fast and Furious. It probably came out around about the same time. I don't know. Need for Speed has gone off on a tangent. You know, it's had track racing games, it's had simulators, it's had open world racing games, you know. But the original Need for Speed Underground, hands down, the one that I'd recommend if you want to get into a street racing game. And there are other options out there, Midnight Club, for example, but Need for Speed Underground, muy picante. Next up is Gran Turismo 4. I had to include one simulator on here, and the one that did it for me was Gran Turismo 4. Now, only exclusive to the PS2. Maybe it doesn't have as good graphics as, say, Gran Turismo 7 or anything like that. But what did it for me was the sheer amount of cars it had in it. Over 800 cars. That is insane. It had over 800 cars, over 50 tracks. Man, I love this game. You know, it is an RPG to some extent. It's all about, you know, building up your car, adding performance upgrades. It's not necessarily to the level of like Need for Speed where you could customize how your car looks. It was more about, you know, your engine, getting into it, upgrading it like that. But it's very heavy on the RPG elements in terms of having to do these races, buy cars, sell your car, get a new one, so on. But the sheer amount of cars it had is insane. I think the new one, Gran Turismo 7, had like 300 or something cars in it, maybe a few more than that. But that's crazy to think that the PS2 version had more cars than the new one. Yes, the new one's got better looking graphics and probably the cars feel more realistic, but I love the original Gran Turismo 4, and the best part is you also had another mode where instead of actually driving the cars, you were basically working as like the pit crew, for example, telling them what to do, you know, overtake this person, go up, slow down, come to the pit, do all of this stuff, which I did do actually sometimes. It was kind of interesting, but Gran Turismo 4, hands down, the best Gran Turismo of all time, in my opinion. Gran Turismo 5 and 6 on the PS3 were good as well. They improved on it, added more stuff to it. But I think the original Gran Turismo 4 was great. And I loved it. The only caveat is it is a huge game and does take up a lot of space. I think it takes up like 1,000 kilobytes, which seems like nothing by today's standards. But when you had an 8 megabyte memory card back in the day, that was like half of your memory gone. It's crazy, right? But I digress. And the best recommendation for newcomers to racing games is an obvious one: Mario Kart. How could you not choose Mario Kart? You know, if you like Mario, if you don't like Mario, everyone knows who Mario is. Super Mario, one of the most iconic video game characters of all time. Heck, he's had TV shows, toys, about 500 video games. You know, he's got the movie coming out. He had one back in the 90s, 80s, but the less said about that, the better. But it is, without a doubt, the best recommendation that I can hand to any person who has never played a racing game but wants to get into them. Because there's a lot of choice with Mario Kart. It has the original on Super Nintendo, which again has a retro feel to it, but still a fun game. And of course, the Game Boy Advance version is just as good, in many ways superior to the original. But the caveat being, it's on a handheld system. So if you wanted to play it with a friend, you would have to, you know, have link cables and whatnot. The GameCube, of course, had the Double Dash version, which was obviously a lot different, but added some new mechanics to it. Of course, you know, there's the Wii version, the Wii U version, the DS version, the Nintendo Switch version, and I think there's a new version that's just come out as well, which has loads of new stuff. These games are just synonymous with racing fans, because even if you're not a racing fan, you're going to love this game, because it's all about just having fun. It can be very competitive, don't get me wrong, but it is a joy to play. It is the game that will make and break friendships. It's the sort of game that you play with your friends, have a laugh, have a couple of pints of beer, or, you know, whatever you're doing. But then by the end of it, you're pulling each other's hair out and going, I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to kill your cat, and I'm going to knock you out if you use a blue shell on me, or whatever. But it is an amazing game. And it doesn't matter which version you play, because they're all just as good as the other one. Of course, the newer ones have added new stuff, new tracks, better graphics and stuff like that. But it doesn't matter which version you play, because Mario Kart, in my opinion, is the best racing game of all time, but also the best racing game for people who want to get into racing games. And like I said, there's so much choice, so as long as you've got a Nintendo console, you're sound, because you're going to be able to get one. If you ain't got a Nintendo console, or you're planning to get one, Mario Kart should be number one in your choice, You know, oh, I also forgot Mario Kart 64. I knew I was forgetting one. But I digress. There we go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave a like. Let me know in the comments below. Do you like this idea where I sort of break down the different types of genres, talk more about them, and give you recommendations on newcomers to the genres? Join me in my next episode where we'll be talking about first-person shooters coming up, from racing games to first-person shooters. And in many ways, yes, first-person shooter could be considered a subgenre, but it really isn't. So I digress, guys. And of course, let me know in the comments below your favourite racing game and which ones would you recommend to a newcomer to racing games. And of course, what racing game are you looking forward to coming out? I am kind of looking forward to the new Crew game, but I don't want to put any money down on it until I've finished with the Crew 2 yet. But I digress, guys. As always, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already and join the family. I'll try and get a couple of videos done this week, but it is going to be a bit of a busy week. But come Sunday, I am going away, so there won't be any videos while I'm away. Maybe there might be one when I come back from my holiday. I will do a holiday vlog, but that won't be uploaded till the latest of Friday night next week. Not tomorrow, the following week. And as always, guys, follow me on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, have a nice day, and I'll see you in the next one. And tonight I am watching Monster Brawl. I have put off watching this so many times, I'm actually going to sit down and watch it tonight. Take care.